Again, my name is Crystal. I am the director of the Center for Academic Success. That's the tutoring center at Pierce College, but I'm also a coordinator for 3CSN. That's the California Community Colleges Success Network, which hosts these amazing events every 3 p.m. on Fridays. Today we are very excited to introduce guest presenters who will introduce themselves very shortly. Go ahead and Chase, tell us who you are.
Yeah, hi, welcome everyone. My name is Chase Selby. I'm from West Los Angeles College, and I am the Learning Center Director over there.
All right. And then we also have Gisela, sorry.
Hi everyone, my name is Giselle Miralles. I am a Writing Center support faculty at Pasadena City College.
Yeah, welcome aboard. And yes, so please do find the chat and then tell us who you are, tell us your name, tell us your college, and tell us your role. Awesome. So go ahead, next slide. All right, so today we are going to have a very conversation-based session. So we will want you to be participating a lot. So do find that chat. You can type in the chat your ideas. You can pose questions. You can answer questions. Tell us your ideas. Tell us what you're doing. If you would like to speak out loud, which we very much want you to do, we'll just ask you to raise your hands. You can find that hand raising function by clicking on reactions. It's a little smiley face at the bottom of your screen, and then you'll have the raise hand function, and you'll also have other reactions. So do feel free to give us some other reactions. Tell us you love stuff, tell us a thumbs up, tell us you're celebrating stuff. A lot of us have our cameras off and a lot of us are muted, which we totally understand. So this helps us engage and know how our audience is responding, even if you don't choose to speak out loud. Next slide. So just a couple of community agreements before I turn it over to our esteemed presenters from Pasadena College and West Los Angeles College. So get ready to read a little bit, do some reflecting, get ready to share your ideas and your strategies in the chat and then out loud to us. Try to make the learning today relatable. Do try to make that extra special efforts to think of your own successes and experiences, but also reflect on the kinds of things that other people are doing and try to think about whether or not that would be applicable in your tutoring session, in your classroom, in your training, in whatever context makes sense for you. Ultimately, the goal for me in these sessions is to just find one incremental change that I can make to my practice. So I'm not going to change the whole world tomorrow, but I might be able to do one thing, one activity, one extra thing to keep in mind. And that is ultimately how transformation happens in our practice, is one tiny little change at a time. So I will encourage you to make one tiny little change today. And also share out what is successful for you so that the rest of us can maybe make a change based on the successes that you've experienced. We do appreciate the feedback to each other and to our presenters, so please do provide that appreciative feedback. And we are going to be using chats, breakouts, and the reaction buttons. So just keep interacting. I get it if your camera's off. I get it if you're muted. A lot of us do that, but there's still a lot of wonderful ways to interact online. So let's take advantage of those. And most importantly, Chase wanted to make sure that we had this in there is have fun, right? And be open to new ideas. So let's make sure that we work a little fun into today too. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the esteemed Giselle and Chase, and they're going to walk us through our topic today. Take it away, rock stars.
Great. So yeah, welcome again. So today, I don't know if you saw the title slide, the sort of topic we're presenting on today. It's about this idea of thank you, tutoring spaces and students' fear of judgment. So we're going to dig into this topic today, talk about it at some length. But before we do so, I just wanted to share the sort of goals and outputs that we have for today. So obviously the first one we need to do is identify the various judgments that students face, either implicit or explicit in the tutoring space. So of course, as we move forward today, we're going to be talking or having a specific focus on the tutoring space, but the tutoring space exists on campus. It exists within academia. It's directly related to what happens in the classroom. So some things are going to be applicable strictly to tutoring. Some things are going to be applicable just to a student's experience on campus or online, I guess. in general. The second goal or output is to understand the practices that are currently being used right now to lessen that judgment, lessen the judgment that the students might feel. And finally, to propose and develop some practices to create a safer and more comfortable learning environment, or create more comfortable learning environments, plural. And yeah, with that, we'll sort of move over to take a quick look at the agenda before we get going. So we're going to begin today on the next slide with a quick reflection. We're going to do that here in the main room. We're going to make use of Jamboard, and Giselle will explain how that's going to work in just a moment here. After that, and after we see or hear some of your thoughts, Giselle and I are going to talk about or define some of the judgments that we're actually going to dive into today. We, prior to this presentation, actually surveyed or polled some of our tutors at West Los Angeles College and Pasadena City College to get their perspective. So we're going to be sharing some feedback that we received directly from the tutors that work with us. We'll then present some of the solutions that have been devised thus far by the college or the learning centers, the tutors, etc. Then number 5, there is a breakout room activity. So we're going to be breaking out into small groups for about 12 minutes. Now, I do want to bring up that we are fully aware that some of you are tuning in, but may not be able to fully participate in the breakout room activity. So we definitely don't want to lose anyone that's here. And I'll explain more once we actually get to this point. But if you are one of those people, you're kind of juggling two things, you still have the opportunity to stay. We have an alternative for you, but we are hoping that there are a decent amount of people that are here, that are able to participate, work with each other, and develop some great ideas together. Number 6, we're going to share out. We're going to give some of our recommendations, the R being Giselle and myself. And then finally, we're going to close out, and as was sort of noted on the registration and the promotion for this and every other event, we're going to have an optional 30 minutes from 4 to 4:30 to have a sort of extended conversation, a little bit more casual. And yeah, that's what we'll be doing today.
All right, thanks, Chase. So as Chase mentioned, we're going to start with a quick reflection, and that's going to happen on the Jamboard. Before you start, though, I do want to show you how to use a Jamboard. And on that Jamboard, you are going to be answering the question, how are students judged in classrooms and tutoring spaces? So if you've never used a Jamboard before, you can get to it by going to this link. I believe it's going to be dropped in the chat too, but please refrain from filling it out yet, because I do want to show you how it's used. So once you go to that bit.ly link, bit.ly/tutor judgment, it will take you here. Once you're at this page, you can simply add a sticky note with your thoughts, or if you have a question on this question, you can also pose that as well. You'll see on the left side, there's a toolbar. You can post sticky notes by clicking on this here. And then you can change the color of your sticky note. So any color, if you're feeling like using pink, you can use pink, orange, whatever you want to use. And then you would type your thought here. And then save, and it will be right here, and you can just place it anywhere. So this is a community Jamboard. Everyone that is here today is invited to participate. So please go ahead and reflect on this question. How are students judged in classrooms and tutoring spaces? You can answer it in any way you feel, right? However you feel to answer that question. What are those judgments? Anything like that. So we're going to give you 2 minutes to do that. It's 3:11. So about 3:13, we'll come back and talk about some of those. And we'll highlight some of the responses that we do get. So go ahead, go to the Jamboard at this link here, bit.ly tutor judgment, and go ahead and post your sticky. All right, so feel free to keep adding to the Jamboard. I'm just going to highlight some of the comments that have been added so far. So this one right here, students feel stupid in quotation marks or like a failure for asking for help. I think that's a common judgment in tutoring spaces, even though we know that when students enter, we don't see them that way. However, there's a stigma that comes with tutoring, which we'll talk about more later. And that's definitely a feeling that some students might feel when they come to ask for help. Another one, students during the COVID crisis are so overwhelmed that it becomes difficult for them to reach out for help. I think that is definitely very true. I think COVID has changed the way our learning spaces are, and in some ways, it could increase judgment, right? Um, for some students, perhaps they feel insecure about the way they use technology, seeking help in a virtual tutoring space or in the classroom. So it becomes even more difficult to seek out the help they need. This one, I think students feel shy even when they need help, right? Asking for help is not always easy. I totally agree with that. Students are judged based on how they speak and present themselves. Some students are made to feel inadequate for being slower than others. I think we would define what slower means, but maybe they feel inadequate when comparing themselves to peers. Um, how much they do and don't know, right? So that's, I think that's more of an objective judgment, right? So when they enter a classroom or when they come into tutoring, you're judging like how much do they know and how much do I need to help fill in as a tutor. So go ahead and feel free to read through all of these. I just wanted to point out some of them. We're definitely going to be going over some of these ideas in the presentation. So stay tuned.
Great. So this slide's going to highlight probably some of the things that we just saw on the previous slide or on the sticky notes, and it might mention a few things that didn't come up. So talking about sort of judgments in our classrooms and our centers that students might face, Giselle and I decided to group them into two distinct groups, the institutional level and the personal level. On the institutional level, these are things that they're deeply ingrained, and that's not to say some of the ones in the personal level are not, but things like grades, right? It is a sort of norm that a student be assigned a grade at the end of the term, and for many, right, that is a sort of a point of judgment. Student learning outcomes, the instructor, and obviously, many students aren't super aware of student learning outcomes, but it is a judgment that's placed upon them when an instructor has to assess, right? Did they meet this SLO or did they not? And any sort of performance assessment, whether that's an assignment or a test or an essay, whatever. And then we sort of move down and group some of these things below in the personal level, and that might be like a skills-based or a knowledge-based judgment. Obviously, when a student comes into the tutoring center, I mean, a tutor's primary job at the beginning is to gauge what does a student know and what do they not yet know, and for some that could feel like a sort of judgment on their intelligence, on their skill, and then things like implicit bias, stereotyping, microaggressions, or discrimination. Obviously, I don't, when I spoke that the institutional level judgments are deeply ingrained, I didn't want to discount how deeply ingrained some of these could be. And obviously there are, you know, solutions, or there's efforts to sort of combat these sort of judgments, but they can be felt and they can be cast upon students, in the tutoring space or really anywhere on our campuses. So this slide is where we are actually going to present you with some of the feedback that Giselle and I received from our tutors when we posed a couple of questions on this topic to them. One of our biggest challenges was actually cutting down some of this feedback, because we posed, here the question is on the top left. This question: can a judgment-free tutoring space exist without radically reshaping the institution or society? And the feedback that we got from our tutors was so interesting that it was so hard to cut. So some of these quotes are a little bit longer, but I really, really valued the perspective that these tutors brought to this question and to this topic. So again, when posed with this question, can a judgment-free tutoring space exist without radically reshaping the institution or society? One of our tutors responded with this: no, our society expects individuals to succeed on their own. However, everybody needs some help sometimes, or needs help sometimes. We should normalize asking for help and acknowledge those who have helped us along the way on our journey. So I thought this was fairly interesting. And the second response takes us perhaps in a slightly different direction, or brings up some things that the first didn't. The second response says the tutoring space is reflective of the belief and value system of the institution, which is inevitably affected by society itself. The space does not exist within a vacuum, especially when students are being redirected to other resources and staff members outside of the tutoring centers. The positive effects of building a judgment-free environment within tutoring centers will only be impactful if it is echoed by other departments, faculty members, and classrooms in the institution. Plus, the institution and society should operate in a way that reinforces inclusive attitudes towards its students. So before we move on to the next slide that shares a little bit more of the feedback that Giselle and I received, I was wondering here if anything from these two responses stick out to anyone. You can share it in the chat. If you'd like, you can raise your hand to quickly maybe highlight a line or two here, or offer your thoughts on anything that these tutors shared in response to this question.
Actually, I thought I was raising my hand.
Oh, no worries. Then it was a raised hand then.
I'm not a real techie, so I'm maybe not using everything properly, but
No worries.
But I wanted to say that we are in such and first of all, I'm a tutor at the Learning Center in Mendocino College, Ukiah, California. That's Northern California. And I'd like to say that we are living in such an amazing time where we are seeing an incredible shift in social consciousness, and the fact that we are becoming more aware of how important we are becoming more inclusive. Even despite all the challenges and the problems that we're seeing, I really do believe that society is becoming more inclusive, and that is going to make a dramatic change in what we, in judgment. I think we're living a time where we can support this, by the workshop you're giving here. We are supporting this, and you're helping us to find better ways to do that. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for that feedback, Constance, and thank you for the kind words about our presentation thus far. So yeah, I really appreciate that feedback. This idea of inclusiveness on the rise, and that being a positive effect for our students. And there's a few comments in the chat here. Jan said, "Love the normalizing idea." Crystal said, "It's so true that we are sold a bill of goods. We're told that we are supposed to figure it out on our own. This is a myth that needs to be disrupted." And I spent a lot of time thinking about how to challenge that myth. Yeah, thank you both. And I see that Danny also added, "I agree with Jan. I too love the idea of normalizing asking for help. Asking for help should be a part of our learning journey." Yeah, I think that these are all great. And for those of us that perhaps see students in front of a classroom where we're talking to a big group of them at once, yeah, trying to beat or sort of challenge that stigma that students that seek out resources or seek out help, or that that are requesting assistance, whatever that assistance looks like, that it's not a sign of weakness, that it's actually a positive thing. Yeah, thanks so much. So we're going to share one more slide of some tutor feedback. This one responds to a slightly different question. The question that we asked tutors here was, what are some things that you currently do or could do to create less judgment in the tutoring space? So this was a follow-up to that first question. So I will read the first response. If there's a volunteer that wants to read the second, by all means. Otherwise, I can read them both. But I will ask again for some thoughts after I'm done. So the first response says, "I provide reassurance to the student. Oftentimes the student is apologizing or expressing guilt for their improper English, unfinished paper, confusion in regards to their assignment instructions, etc. It's best to remind them that these do not merit any shame or apology, and that it's okay that they're finding something difficult. Additionally, I like to offer students options. The goal of tutoring is to meet the students' needs and encourage their learning. This is best done by letting them lead the session. I provide alternative ways we can conduct this session. We can talk through chat, use a whiteboard, brainstorm together, read and analyze text together, create examples, etc. By doing this, the student hopefully feels more comfortable in knowing that there are several different routes we can take to complete their assignment and accommodate their needs or preferences. This allows them to feel less judged overall, since they know they are not restricted to undergoing only one approach to tutoring. So hopefully with this response, you can kind of see why we had such a hard time cutting this down and making it only a line or two. I'll go ahead, just keeping an eye on time. I'll read the second response. So if anyone wants to share their thoughts, we can get that instead. So the second response we had to this question that we'd like to share is this. Honestly, it's all about perspective. Realizing that every student is different and requires personalized support, while also believing wholeheartedly that every student is capable of achieving academic success, is a biggie. A phrase that I like to summarize this ideology is meet people where they are. The truth is, as educators, we don't know what a student is going through at any particular moment, and it's certainly not going to help the process if we conduct ourselves with a judgmental demeanor. Lately, something I've been implementing a lot is creating a safe space through expectations and encouragement. For instance, I find that a student is struggling, if a student is struggling mightily with a concept, I'll say something like, I know this is a lot to take in, addressing the expectations, but you're doing amazing. Words of encouragement. Your work ethic is remarkable. More words of encouragement. Awesome compliments can create a lot of accomplishment. Great. So kind of same thing as last time. I wonder if there's any thoughts, any lines that anyone wants to highlight. Just any reaction to what we heard from the two tutors who we chose to highlight on this slide. And again, feel free just to put it in the chat and I can read it out loud, or you can raise your hand. So I'll begin. Thank you so much, Crystal, for adding your thought in the chat. I'll read that as we perhaps wait for a few others. Crystal said, I love this tutor who surfaced the apology. Students and everyone else feel the need to apologize for confusion, grammar mistakes, spelling errors, etc. It's a great opportunity to normalize and celebrate confusion and mistakes as opportunity for growth. Definitely. Yeah, I've definitely noticed that myself. Students, the excessive sort of feeling that they need to apologize for something. And I always take that as a moment to stop and let them know, you only should apologize if you've done something wrong. And you've done nothing wrong here, so there's no need to apologize.
I just wanted to say that one thing I do, and not just with my the students that I work with, but with everybody, I'm never afraid to admit a mistake. And quite often when I'm working with a student, I'll make a mistake. And so I say, oh, whoops, you know. In fact, I think that was part of one of our workshops we attended here, right, Crystal? Whoops was one of the words. Yeah, one of the three words. So.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah. Oops, ouch, whoa. 3 words, oops, ouch, and whoa. That's great. Thanks, Constance.
Yeah, thank you. And then Jan said, pointing out the positive shows the student what to build on. It also shows them their notice. Definitely. Yeah, thank you so much. So yeah, Giselle, if you want to take us on our next slide.
Thanks for all those amazing comments on those tutor responses. So the next slide, we're going to talk about the current solutions that exist on campuses to mitigate judgments. So what sorts of things do we usually see on college campuses to make students feel less judged in a negative way? Obviously, this is going to be different for different colleges, but these are the 3 things that Chase and I felt that we saw on our campuses and then other campuses that we've been on. So the first thing that might seem familiar to some of you, if not all, is equity training. Equity training usually focuses on how to best serve marginalized student groups. These trainings can focus on topics like culturally responsive teaching, equity-mindedness, cultural capital/wealth, and allyship for LGBTQ plus students, students of color, undocumented students, and any other marginalized groups. Groups of students that have that untapped potential. And these sorts of trainings teach us to be more equitable in how we provide services. They teach us to see students as a whole person, and it helps us, manage our own implicit biases. These are very common across many institutions. Another thing that we have on campuses are training programs on this idea called growth mindset. Many campuses encourage their faculty, tutors, and staff to adopt a growth mindset in order to shift praise and judgment passed on students. For those of you who might not have heard of growth mindset before, it was created by someone named Carol Dweck, and it's a popular belief that promotes the idea of intelligence being a learned trait, not something innate. So people who believe their talents can be developed through hard work, good strategies, and input from others, that's what you would call a growth mindset, versus a fixed mindset is more of a believing that intelligence or other talents are innate. So growth mindset shifts that idea by saying, no, talents are not innate. It's something that we grow and develop through hard work and learning, right? Again, many campuses encourage us to adopt this sort of mindset because shifting to a growth mindset allows us to believe all students can be successful if they just put in the work. Another thing that exists is contract grading. Some of you might have taken instructors, or some of you are instructors that have implemented this sort of form of grading. And it's a grading practice that helps mitigate judgment by eliminating grades in order to focus on learning. So instead of getting, say, an A, B, or C on a paper, you would instead get something like a pass or rewrite, right? So it's less about knowing how to, or it's less about assigning a judgment in the way of a grade, and more focusing on, do you understand, are you learning in the classroom? However, this practice isn't institutionalized, so that means that it's not something that's required, and it's solely the instructor's choice to implement that. So these are the current things that exist to mitigate judgment on our campuses. There might be more that exists on your campus that we didn't list here. But Chase and I thought of this question: have any of these solutions established academia as a truly judgment-free zone? While we do have these different things, do we really feel that judgment isn't present on our campuses? The short answer for that is not quite. Oh, I do want to shout out Chase in the chat. He did say Alfie Kohn has a great article titled "The Perils of Growth Mindset" that offers an alternative or a critical view of growth mindset. So that's something, if you're interested to learn about growth mindset in a different way, it's more of a critique, you can look that up. But like I said, are any of these solutions, have they truly established a judgment-free zone? The reason why it hasn't is because while racial or ethnic or any identity-based judgment might be impossible to remedy while living in a patriarchal white supremacist society, it is easier to evaluate and change institutional or educational judgments. That means that we have that more so in our power. While we can't change society on our own altogether, right? We can at least try to implement practices in our work so that we can help students feel less judged when they come to us for help. The institution does require instructors to give grades, right? And like Chase mentioned, SLOs are assigned. Instructors are expected to meet these student learning outcomes and ensure that their students are meeting these outcomes in order to pass the course. So even those instructors that decide to implement contract grading, they still have to assign a letter grade at the end and ensure that their students are meeting those student learning outcomes. So still the instructor is required to pass judgment on the student, even when they're trying to lessen the amount of judgment they're getting in the classroom. And in short, anecdotal evidence would suggest that students hold a fear of judgment. Even though we do try to mitigate it, it's nearly impossible to eliminate all of it from our institutions. Another thing that we wanted to talk about is how have these practices affected our judgment in tutoring spaces? So we've talked a lot about how these judgments affect our classrooms, how the judgments affect instructors, but we want to focus more so on the tutoring space itself. So since these judgments still exist, students need to seek out tutoring because they're fearful of receiving a poor grade, right? So because grades exist, students go to seek out tutoring because they're scared of that judgment that they might get at the end of the semester, right? They, whether it be they want to get an A or they want to keep from failing, they're still fearful of the judgment that they're getting. And it could hold them back from meaningful learning. So even if an instructor is trying to implement contract grading, meaningful learning is still hard to reach if the student is fearful of a grade. So being laser focused on judgment is usually why students come to tutoring in the first place. However, there's still judgment coming from the tutor because, as a tutor, as Chase mentioned, you have to assess where that student's learning is at in order to adequately tutor them. So this leads to other fears for our students, right? They fear taking risks and experimenting, which could lead to deeper learning. But because they're scared to take these risks and experiment, deeper learning isn't as achievable. There's also this fear of othering. Often, as I mentioned earlier and was mentioned in the Jamboard, students are scared of getting tutoring because of the stigma that exists, right? It's an old stigma, but it's hard. It's a hard one to shake, which is that students come to tutoring only when they're failing. It makes them feel fearful to seek out help, and they don't want to be seen as that student that needs the extra help. So this leads to that fear of coming to tutoring because they don't want to be seen that way, and it's further magnified when compounded with racialized and or gendered stereotypes or really any identity-based judgment. So depending on that student's identity, it might make seeking tutoring even more difficult. So these are the sorts of judgments that are going on and something to be mindful of as a tutor, right? Like I said, there's so many things that we do to try to mitigate judgment, but it's hard to eliminate it completely from the tutoring space and the classroom.
I think you might still be muted. Yeah, go for it.
I just like to comment that I agree with all that you're saying, but I have found that one of one of the reasons that I see is that the majority of students really cannot visualize. They do not understand how they can be helped. They just don't understand that, number one, that they can be helped. They can't visualize it. I mean, we spend a lot of time as tutors working on how we can help them, but a student can't really, visualize, how can I be helped or that I can be helped. And I've actually visually seen a student that I've worked with. It's like the light bulb goes on over their head. They have an epiphany, and they realize that they've been helped. But that's not something that well, I don't know how we could give students. I don't know how the instructors or who could perhaps prime students to how they can be helped in tutoring.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And I some of that actually might come up, I think, in this breakout room discussion. And there's a few comments in the chat too, so I appreciate everyone sharing. Just to be mindful of time, I am just going to prepare us for this next part, and that is going to be our breakout room discussion. So this is something that I mentioned earlier when I was reading the agenda for the day. So the main thing is, right, we want people to participate, we want people to share, we want people to work together, but we are mindful and we do recognize that some people might not be able to do so. So if you are one of those people that can't be a participating member in a breakout room, please feel free to send a message to either myself or to Giselle. And we've reserved one of the breakout rooms for that purpose, just to place people in that aren't going to be participating that are maybe doing something else, and they'll be brought back obviously to the main group once we are completed. We're going to give groups 12 minutes to actually discuss some of the questions that we actually saw earlier, the ones that Giselle and I posed to our tutors. So the big sort of overarching question being, can a judgment-free zone exist without radically reshaping the institution? If so, how? And again, a judgment-free sort of tutoring space is what we're focused on here. And the sort of smaller questions to prompt discussion would be for you to share any practices that you have already established, or perhaps some practices that you wish to enact in the future, either as we continue tutoring online, or as in the future, once we do have more services on site or on campus, you can highlight those as well. So again, if anyone is not able to be a participant, we'll just put you in a breakout room with others, so you don't have to feel any pressure to participate. Alternatively, you can stay in the main room, but I don't know if you want us just staring at you the whole time. So yeah, I'm just going to give you just a few minutes while I set up the break, or a few seconds, I guess, when I set up the breakout rooms, and then if I don't hear from you, I'll put you in a room, and we will send out these questions as a sort of announcement when you're in our breakout rooms as well, so you don't forget what we're talking about.
And real quick, you will be posting to the same Jamboard. So I can show you all real fast. Okay, so on the Jamboard, if you click on the arrows here, you're going to see different Jamboards for each room. So depending on the breakout room you're in, please find your Jamboard and post your thoughts to that